Now, on top of all this, there's one last thing that you really need to consider. Home prices are down. Interest rates are up. You're just paying off your landlord's mortgage. And you'll never get into the market unless you do it right now. These are all the reasons why people are telling you you should be buying a home. But I want to talk in this video about why you might regret buying a home, and why even when everyone else is saying that you should, it might just not be the right time for you. But before we get into it, my name is Nolan Mathias, and if you want to thrive financially, this is the place for you. So go ahead, click that subscribe button, and hit that like button if you want more videos like this. And don't forget, you can get a free copy of my book by going to mortgagesecrets.ca. Okay, so let's discuss why you shouldn't be buying a home. Because in this crazy market, everybody seems to have an opinion of whether you should be buying or whether you shouldn't, or whether you should be selling and what type of mortgage you should get. But at the end of the day, this comes down to a decision that is about you, not about them, not about their opinions, but about what is in your best interest and about what is absolutely right for you and whether or not it is the right timing. Because whether or not you should be buying a home is not something that is decided by the economy. It's not something that's decided by interest rates or your realtor or the people around you. It comes down to whether or not you are ready. And I want to give you 6 really solid reasons why you shouldn't necessarily buy a home. Now, I'm going to post another video a few weeks down the road where we're going to talk about why you should be buying a home. But when you're considering this decision, I want you to make sure that you're considering both sides and coming up with the right solution for you. So let's start first and foremost with the idea that you shouldn't be buying a home with the expectation that interest rates are going to go down. That is probably the single biggest myth in the real estate market right now. It's that the Bank of Canada or the Federal Reserve in the US is going to have to bring down interest rates because they're just going to have to at some point. And if you're buying based on that decision and hoping that interest rates will go down, well, you could be in for a really rough ride, especially if you bought too much house. So you definitely shouldn't be making your buying decisions based on the direction you think interest rates are going to go, because the truth is the direction of interest rates is anybody's guess. Now, the second reason why you shouldn't be buying a home is if you don't have cash reserves in addition to the down payment that you've saved. So we see this a lot. People save their down payment, whether it's $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, and then they take it and they apply it to the purchase of a property. But that $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 is all the money that they have in the world. Every single penny that they have is being applied to purchasing a property. And that is just not a wise decision. The most important thing you need to do when you're considering buying a property, especially for the first time, is make sure that you have enough cash reserves so that in the event of a job loss or a change in the economy, or maybe interest rates go up, you have enough money in reserves to make sure that you don't find yourself in a position where you're going into foreclosure. Now, how much should you have for cash reserves? Well, there's a lot of different theories on this, anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. I think you should have at least 6 months worth of income in savings at minimum before you even think about buying a home. Because on average, it takes 3 months for somebody to find a new job if they lose a job, and having that 6 months worth of income set aside will help make life a lot easier in the event that something happens in the economy or something happens that is outside of your control that affects whether or not you can make your mortgage payments going forward. Now, the third reason why you shouldn't be buying a home is if you don't plan on living it for an extended period of time. The decision to buy a home is a long-term decision. It's something that you should be thinking about along the lines of a 7 to 15-year decision. Because if you find yourself in a position where markets are fluctuating, and let's say you lose 10, 15% of the value of your home, well, it could put you in a position where you cannot sell and subsequently not be able to make the move that you had already planned on making. So one of the few times where we tell people that maybe you should be renting is in that event where somebody is only looking at owning a home for 2 or 3 years. And this is especially true if somebody is looking at making a move to another province or another state, because those are typically the types of moves that you absolutely have to make. You know, if you buy a home in a city that you plan on staying in and there's no chance you're going to move to another city or another province or another state, well, then you can ride out the fluctuations in the market. But if you have that plan to move somewhere else and the market drops, it could handcuff you to that market. And oftentimes the potential upside of buying isn't necessarily worth the potential downside. And on top of that, if there's changes to interest rates that you need to ride out or changes in the economy that you need to ride out, buying and owning a home with the long term in mind provides a substantially longer time horizon for you to be able to ride out a lot of the rocky roads that will come with owning a home. Now, the fourth reason you shouldn't buy a home is if you are getting into a bidding war in order to buy one. Now, this is something that we saw quite a bit in 2020 and 2021, where people were getting into bidding wars, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more than homes were worth in order to be able to buy into the market. Well, that was a mistake, and it will almost always be a mistake. Getting into a bidding war when buying a home is often a recipe for disaster. First and foremost, it prevents you from having financing conditions when you go to buy. Second, it means you typically pay more than what the property is listed for, and it also means that you're probably participating in a market that has mass hysteria, which usually doesn't end well. And on top of that, it's often an indicator that housing prices are going to come to a peak at some time in the near future, which means there's probably going to be a downturn. And if there is, it means you could find yourself in a position where you lose a whole bunch of your equity. And that could put you in a position where you aren't able to sell the home because you owe more than what it's worth. So bidding wars are definitely something that you want to stay away from. And if you're in a market where there are bidding wars not on every single property, but only the best ones, a really good alternative to getting into a bidding war is to find a house that maybe doesn't have as much interest in it, maybe isn't perfect with respect to finishings and all the things that you're looking for in a house, but are things that you can add or improve on, ultimately getting you a better deal on the home and allowing you to make it exactly the home that you want it to be. So if it were me and I had the choice between getting into a bidding war on the perfect home or buying a home that maybe isn't perfect, but is something that I can make perfect, well, there's a pretty good chance I can get a deal on the one that I need to make perfect. And as a result, I'll be able to improve it and subsequently probably put more dollars in my pocket by making the property better rather than buying one that somebody else had already done the work to. Now, the fifth reason why you shouldn't buy a home is if you have to do fraud to get a mortgage. Now, let me be clear here. What is fraud? Fraud is defined as any misrepresentation or any omission in a mortgage application. So in other words, if you don't tell them something that you know will affect your mortgage application or you misrepresent your income, you are committing fraud. And this is not only dangerous, but it also means that you're probably buying a home that you cannot afford. And if you can't afford it, that's a recipe for somewhere down the road going into foreclosure or going into bankruptcy because you can't make your mortgage payments. So definitely don't let somebody talk you into doing fraud in order to get a mortgage. And for the most part, most professionals in the industry are good and ethical people, but there are some that will try to convince you to do things that are gray area and are putting you in a position where you can not only afford your home, but could get fined or go to jail as a result. So stay away from doing things like misrepresentations or omissions on your mortgage application. It's just not worth it. And last but not least, and this ties into the last one, just don't buy a home that you cannot afford. If after the payment and the taxes and the heat and all of those things, you feel like you won't have any money left at the end of the month, just don't buy that home. It's not worth the stress of being house poor. And believe me, I've been there. Even as a mortgage professional who's been in the business for the last 20 years, I found myself in the position where I didn't have enough money at the end of the month, and it was one of the most stressful periods of my life. It's just not worth finding yourself in that situation. Now, luckily, we were able to find our way out of it, but if there's one piece of advice that I just wish everyone would hear, is it's way better to have a smaller house, maybe not your dream home, but one that you can afford and have money left over at the end of the month and be worried about whether or not you're going to be able to make the payment. Now, on top of all this, there's one last thing that you really need to consider, and that's your gut. Just your gut feel on whether or not you should be buying a home and whether it's the right time for you. This is the single most important thing when it comes to buying a home. If you don't feel right about your realtor, if you don't feel right about your mortgage broker, if you don't feel right about your bank, if you don't feel right about the advice that you're getting or the things that you're reading, just press the pause button, continue to do your research, and wait until the time feels right for you. And I know for some people, if you never jump in, you'll never do it. But it's better to not jump in than jump in at the wrong time or when you don't feel like you can actually afford to buy the home and then get yourself into significantly more trouble because you felt like you just had to do it. So go with your gut more than anything. And this isn't about timing the market. Let me be real clear on that. This is just about assessing whether or not it feels right for you to buy a home. There should be nobody pressuring you into this. There should be nobody trying to convince you. And you shouldn't be convinced by somebody to buy a home when you just aren't ready. So keep that in mind when making this very important decision. It is up to you, and it's about how you feel and that you feel right making the decision. Now, if you want more tips and tricks like this, I definitely recommend that you check out this video right here, which is about 5 money mistakes that are keeping you poor.